To our friends and our colleagues in America and Latin America. We're really pleased to have you join us. We've just gone over 50 participants and we've hit the hour. So we're going to start. And first, a very warm and a very big welcome to all of you for this, what will be a very interesting learning lab on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. We're putting this on. It'll be an hour and a half with a very interesting panel. I say interesting not just because it's my job to say that, but absolutely it is, because we have with us some of the specialists who've been working in the committee on this process from a long way back and are continuing to do so, who are going to give us some insight into the process itself and how it's being used and how it will be used. But we also have three members from ILC, from Africa, from Asia, and from Latin America, who are going to be sharing with us how they're using the declaration in their work in support of the land rights of peasant farmers. So just a reminder, we call this a learning lab because it is meant to be a learning experience. We're not talking about something in a way which is very abstract. We hope to be talking in very practical ways. We hope that this discussion, we've orientated this discussion to be useful to you if you're a practitioner, if you work in government, if these are issues that that you come across in the work that you do. So as we start, just to say that we will be recording this session. We hope you don't object. If you do object, please put it in the chat in the next 5 seconds. And if you do, then if there are objections, we will reconsider, but no objections, we will carry on. And we will record it because we like to make it available to others that are not able to join us at this point in time. May I ask you to please remember to mute your microphones unless you're one of the speakers. And also for our friends who are joining us who are either French speakers or Spanish speakers, there is translation available. At the bottom of the screen, the little globe, if you press that, you can put it on the French channel or on the Spanish channel. So please feel free to join in the language that you prefer. The chat, we hope that you'll use the chat. You can also write in the chat in English or in French or in Spanish. I have colleagues that will translate the questions that are in French or in Spanish into English if needed, so that we're not talking to each other only in our language groups. So let me just give you a very quick introduction to why we've organized this webinar. The International Land Coalition exists to support our wide membership of 250 so organizations in their efforts to secure land rights. Among our 250 members are about 100 that directly represent land users. Many of those land users would call themselves peasants. These are pastoralists, small farmers, women farmers, fisher folk, etc. And our members who directly represent such land users represent about 70 million land users around the world. This is the core of our membership and who we exist to serve and to support in their efforts to secure their own land rights. So we would like to raise awareness not only among our membership but more widely in the land sector about the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. What are the state party obligations and how they can be used to protect the rights of land. We want to share some good practices to show that to show how in different countries some of our members are using it and how it's working. And we would like to also explain a bit how the international human rights mechanism monitors the implementation of UNDROP. So really how it's made something, just even in the last 2 years since it was adopted, into something that's really alive, living, and used. So we have quite a lineup, and I feel really privileged to be able to introduce a great colleague who we've been liaising with for a long time, who we respect very much for his work on economic, social, and cultural rights. This is Christophe Gollet from the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. Christophe has been collaborating with us over the last while to produce a guide on the right to land and UNDROP. So there's nobody better, I would say really, in the world than him to explain clearly and straightforwardly how UNDROP is a tool for the right to land. So Christophe, it's a great pleasure to start with you. Please, could you lay out in the way that you do, simply and clearly, exactly how the UNDROP, as far as our concern goes on the right to land, can be a very powerful tool. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yes, it's actually a great pleasure to collaborate with the ILC since I don't know, at least 10 years, and in this project in particular. And I'm also very happy, and the Academy also, that you have made the effort to make the guide available in French and Spanish, and to also do this webinar in French and Spanish and English, because it's a way to attract and to reach a lot more people. So thank you for that. It's a great pleasure.
Christophe, may I just interrupt you?
Yes.
My apologies, because there's something very important I need to do before you speak, and I won't be able to do it after you speak, because it's a poll. We would like to poll everybody about how much they know about UNDROP, and I apologize because I was supposed to do this before you speak. Now, if I do it after you speak, obviously the poll won't work, will it? Because everybody will know everything. So if you forgive me for the interruption, we would like to launch a poll for everybody to participate in. And I hope it should be coming up on your screen. You should be able to see it. And it's really one question. Are you familiar with UNDROP? So please put in your answer. I can see we've got 7 of the 91 people so far. We have 95 participants, 15. Excellent. I
think you have to click on the 3 languages so that it works. At least but that was the case for me.
Okay. Well, in fact, it's been you can answer in the language of your choice, but it's been a super quick poll, and if you're trying now to do it, I think it is closed, and I'm going to share the results. I'm sorry for not leaving it open longer. It stayed open very quickly, but the indication from the poll is that most of you are familiar with UNDROP. Some not at all, and some partly. So I think, Christophe, I'm going to hand over to you, and I hand over with the challenge from this poll that you're speaking probably to a very informed audience, and so you'll need to make sure they know even more by the time you finish your short presentation. Over to you, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've said already that I'm very happy with the Academy to collaborate with ILC. So I just go to the presentation. So even if 3/4 of you know a lot about UNDROP, just a very short history. It all started in 2001 with La Via Campesina, who had the first meeting in Jakarta and were discussing a first draft. Then we had the food crisis, 2008, and lots of attention about the right food security, and land, and the start of land grabbing a bit everywhere. And as a response, the Human Rights Council asked its experts in the advisory committee to do a study on how to better protect the rights of peasants and other people working in rural areas. And the committee presented its final study in 2012. And it's the same year when the Human Rights Council decided to negotiate a UN declaration on the rights of peasants and other people working in rural areas, UNDROP. The negotiation started in 2012, and it lasted 6 years. which can seem to be a lot in the UN, but in fact, every year of negotiation was 1 week of negotiation in Geneva. So it was 6 weeks of negotiation. And around the big questions during the negotiation was the question about recognizing so-called new rights in human rights law, like the right to land, and collective rights. Some states didn't want to recognize collective rights in the declaration. So we had to fight, but at the end we have a very strong declaration with a very strong right to land that I will present now. The UNDROP was adopted by a large majority of states at the General Assembly, 121 states in favor, 8 against, and 54 abstentions, mostly from Europe. What is important, it's as it is a General Assembly resolution of the UN. In the resolution, it asks all states to implement UNDROP. So it's not only those who voted in favor that should implement UNDROP, but everyone should implement. It's like at the national level, if you have a parliament adopting a law by a vote, it applies to everyone. So it was by a vote that it was adopted, but it applies to all UN member states. Now, since 2 or 3 years, we are, of course, working towards the implementation of UNDROP, and that publication is part of that. A small way to say that you can work to promote UNDROP in 2 main ways. One is to promote the whole declaration, and one is to promote specific rights. And so we have other projects, for example, on the right to seats, and in this case, this project on the right to land. So as an organization, you can decide to promote the whole declaration or to promote the right to land in UNDROP. The definition of the right to land, it's in Articles 5 and 17. First is the right to land and other natural resources. Second, it can be exercised individually, alone, or collectively in association with others or as a community. Then third, it's in order to achieve an adequate standard of living, have a place to live in security, peace, and dignity, and develop peasant culture. So it's not only to have an adequate standard of living, it's also to live in security, peace, and dignity, and to develop peasant culture. Then if we look at the main elements of the right to land, it includes freedoms and entitlements, freedom from discrimination, and it includes gender discrimination. We also have a right to rights of rural women in Article 4 of the declaration. That includes protection against forced evictions and displacement. It also includes protection against the negative effects of land exploitation. And there is a need, if there is land exploitation, to do human rights impact assessment, consultation in good faith, and agreement on benefit sharing. Then it also includes entitlements to agrarian reform. Linked to that, there is a limit to excessive concentration, the social function of land, and the priority to be given to landless and youth. And the last element of the right to land is the right to the conservation and sustainable use of land. This declaration, and the right to land in particular, is complementary with other international instruments. So we have, in the negotiation process, we have used a lot agreed language from human rights instruments, like the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or the CFS Voluntary Guidelines of 2012. So in the Article 5 and 17, you can find the agri language taken from these instruments. The added value of UNDROP is that it increased accountability and access to justice. That's the objective. And it also details states' obligations in a way that is a lot more detailed than in other international instruments. And also a last thing about UNDROP is that as it is a human rights instrument, in international law, it should prevail over other international instruments. So in that case, it's a bit less maybe important, but when we speak about the right to seats, for example, it's very important because it should prevail over intellectual property rights. So that's a bit what I wanted to say. That's the different elements that I have highlighted in the guide. And in the guide, you have the last part, which is on implementation, towards implementation, examples of monitoring, implementation of UNDROP and the right to land at the national, regional, and national levels, and have taken examples after interviewing lots of people who will speak now from Nepal, Colombia, Africa, also from the human rights treaty bodies and regional bodies, And so I'm very happy to hear from Jagat, Emerance, Liliana, Helen, and Michael, how they have already used UNDROP and how you, all the other ones, you could use UNDROP to better protect the right to land in your country. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Christophe. That's very clear and very direct. If anybody has any questions for Christophe, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will come back to him and give him a chance to speak a little bit later in the program, together with those who are going to speak just now. But in order to keep us moving, I would like to move first of the case studies, which is Nepal. And I'm really pleased to introduce a veteran of the land rights movement in Nepal, Jagat. Jagat is one of the humblest people that you will meet, but he's a real engine behind the land reform process in Nepal. He works equally with the Prime Minister and with communities out in the field. And a lot that has happened in Nepal has been a part of has been things that Jagat has been involved in. So Jagat, we're really privileged to have you with us. Jagat's organization is a member of the ILC, and ILC was supporting some of our members to go and participate in the sessions that Christophe outlined. So the process, as Christophe said, of conceiving and promoting and drafting was very much driven by FIAN and La Via Campesina. And as ILC, we supported a number of members to take part in some of those sessions of the committee. Jagat was one of those, and Jagat in particular was particularly promoting the importance of women's land rights, and I think what we see in the declaration on gender is partly due to the likes of Jagat, the engagement of Jagat and other colleagues in the negotiation process. So Jagat, please, over to you, and tell us how in all that you've been doing, you have been using the declaration in the 2 years since it's been adopted. I see that Jagat has just disappeared. So Jagat, are you still with us? We may have lost Jagat.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay. Please go ahead. Okay. Please, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay. I have a respected moderator and panelists and friends. I have a very short presentations, and I would like to share my screen first, and then I would like to go to the presentations. So, okay, what happened? Is this screen share? Okay, right.
Not yet, Jagat.
The green button, Jagat. Okay, it works.
Yep, we see it.
Okay. Yeah, it's now visible. Yes.
Yes. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Just a minute. I had participated from second to last. It's a 6 sessions. That's I don't want to go in details, but we have a number of meetings with the different rapporteurs, and then the CSOs, the La Via Campesina, FIAN Internationals, and others advocates on this, including the Geneva Academy. In my country, basically CSSA has been facilitating the following articles: Article 4, women's access to land; Article 5, access to natural resource; Article 15, right to adequate food; Article 16, standard living and access to means of production; and Article 17, right to land; and Article 24 is the right to housing. Basically, we are working in micro and macro both levels. That's basically I put some major actions due to the time constraint. I don't want to go in detail. First thing is in the case in Nepal, we have a challenge on the declarations, basically the domestication of the declarations. So we translate it into Nepali and then submit it in different government sectors and CSOs, and we have a number of dialogues. And then also even in the pandemic period, we have a number of webinars on this, because it's in Nepali, we circulated at the community level to national policy levels. In the results for basically women access to, it's basically we have both kinds of like the campaign. One is basically it's a cultural practice, so that we have a mobilization of the women in the grassroots levels, more than 50 districts, and in federal and provincial level and local level, we have a policy discussions. So now it's a CSRC is working in the 14 local governments to formulate the women's access to, not only the access, it's the control over land, and the basically the women's decision making on the process of all like the land related actions. So that we have been done, and then we have some number of case studies I put in the link. In the result 5, there are a number of studies we have done, basically together with the Amnesty International and other human rights organizations, especially Forum Asia, and the Amnesty International. For the indigenous peoples, it's basically the national park issues. We have done, we have carried out the study with the Amnesty International, and also regarding the Harua Chora and other things is with the Forum Asia. Article 15, right to adequate food. Basically, our position is a food sovereignty, and then as per the Constitution of Nepal, it's a food sovereignty is basically the fundamental rights, and then we basically the right to food network, FIAN Nepal, Farmers Alliance, CSO Alliance, and CSA organized number of consultation and submitted the recommendation on the Food Sovereignty Act and regulations, and still in the the final, it's a discussion on that side. But we are in the position that's we very link that with this declarations, Article 15. And 16 and 17 I put in together. Basically, CSRC has been campaigned at the field level. It's a right to land, not the access to land. That's the one issue that was discussed in the even like UN discussion in Geneva. And then we are talking on the different government level. It's a local level and province level and the federal level. So that one of the it's a cases we submitted with the study and evidence to the government. These are the points that you are violating the rights of basically the development and national park issues. Second one is that we have still the semi-bonded systems, so that we have a campaign, basically the women's, basically the semi-bonded system, it's called Harua Charwa or Hadia or Kamaya. That's we have also the study on that, and then we submitted based on this one. And then we have a different kinds of campaign like tenancy campaign, Guti land campaign, landless campaign, flood victims campaign, including national park. It's a victim of the national park, so that we have a kinds of alliance on that. And then basically we are fighting number of cases on even like the local level and petitions on the eviction cases, especially from the development initiatives and national park. Results in 24 is basically the right to housing. Basically, it's we are basically working with the, after long struggle, the government is agreed to form the land resolving commission. And then we are hoping it's coming year around 1.4 million people are going to receive the land certificate, especially for the housing cases. So that's we really give some kinds of like we have some base on the like ESCR right, which we also fight in the Geneva and submitted our shadow report or civil society reports. Based on that, we negotiated with the government, and the government agreed that one also. And then we linked that article as well for the housing right. And then the commission is working with the local government. Also, they form the district committees, and then they have a national committees. And CSRC is closely working with one side is the commission, and another side we are mobilizing the basically the landless peoples for their housing rights. The second point is recently we have like the bigger earthquake, and then for the earthquake we basically support the National Reconstruction Authority for the even from the very and then mobilization of the peoples, and then around 15,000 peoples relocated in the safer places. So we have some have some linkages on that. We have also challenges. It's on that in Nepal case. One is the declaration is a voluntary guideline, because we have a number of discussion with the government, and then sometimes they reluctant. This is a voluntary guideline, how to include that things. So that's one issue. Second point is basically we are working the it's a micro and macro level, and then the changing the government bureaucrats, minister, even in the the local level, provincial level, and national level as well. So that's basically the issue. And then third one is basically government is a low priority. Still, UN agency didn't have priority on this in the case of Nepal, because it's we have a number of discussion with some other UN agencies as well on the rights and peasants and other people working in rural area. But basically they are focusing on the VGGT, but not on the is a UNDROP. The last one is basically is a CSRC, is an alliance, is basically facilitating some kinds of research, and also some mobilizations and awareness, and then also cases, but still some of the cases is lacking in the resources. And that's, I think it's I finished my presentations, and I really appreciate your questions and input on this. We have a number of initiatives in Nepal with some other organizations as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagat, and congratulations for you. It was interesting to see the declaration in Nepali and to see how many different areas of land rights in Nepal you've been working on with reference to the declaration. I understand your challenge of the frequent changes in the government. I remember when we were hosted by the Prime Minister for the Global Land Forum in 2009. And we met him, and then a few weeks after the Global Land Forum, he was replaced. So all the follow-up that we hope to do with him from the Global Land Forum had to start again from scratch. I'm sure you have questions. Please put them in the chat. I already see there's a question for Christoph in the chat, and actually I'm going to pause to give people a chance to put questions for Jagat in the chat. We can come to them now, or we can come to them after the next speakers. But I'm just going to pause and jump back to Christoph before we go on to hear from Colombia. There's a question from Sandy, Christoph, you've probably seen it. Does UNDROP envisage or prefer any particular form of land tenure in relation to peasants' rights to land? Do you want to give a quick answer to that before we move on?
Yes, no, it doesn't. And that was it. The good thing was that declaration was adopted after the 2012 guidelines adopted at the CFS. So we took agreed language from there. And you know, before that, the discussion was a lot about individual property right, and we had to fight for collective right for indigenous peoples. And the guidelines of 2012 really, for the first time, recognize also the collective rights and the traditional rights to land for peasants, non-indigenous peasants, and that was more easy when we drafted the declaration to also include that. So it's in Article 17.3, and so it includes customary land tenure rights. It includes natural commons and their related systems of collective use and management. So in fact, it's really close to the reality, because we know that in the world most of the land is used collectively and managed collectively. So that was the aim of the negotiator to include that. So it's not only individual, it's also collective. I just want to say that I didn't say that Bolivia played the key role among the states in the negotiation and also now in the promotion. And we are very happy because Bolivia is back in Geneva because of what happened in Bolivia in the last 2 years. That was a bit difficult, but now they are back. And with us in the webinar, we have Natalia Pacheco, who was one of the key person in the Bolivia government representatives who played a key role during the negotiation, and she continues to support the work of the implementation. So Bolivia is key, and we are very happy that they are back.
Thank you, Christoph. That's a really important issue, and I'm interested to see the link that you're able to build between the voluntary guidelines and the declaration. Within ILC, what we've done is adopted 10 commitments or 10 dimensions of land rights that to our members are the critical dimensions that need to be reflected for what we would call people-centered land rights. There's some great questions coming up for Jagat, but actually what I'm going to do is wait, because as I see the questions, they may well be relevant for Colombia and for Africa as well. So we're going to hang on with those questions, but please do continue to put questions in the chat. And we're going to go over to Colombia, and I'm very pleased to present Liliana Vargas. She is with the IOC member RENAF, the Red Nacional de Agricultura Familiar. And I think Colombia really is an iconic country in considering the rights of peasant farmers. We know that the long civil war was very much related to land, the level of displacement of family farmers, the level of human rights abuses, continuing now the level of violation of land rights, land and environmental defenders is incredibly high. So it would be great to hear how in Colombia, in this very opportune but also very, very challenging situation, how you see the relevance of the declaration in your work. So Liliana, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Mike. Efectivamente, para nosotros como colombianos, esta declaración ha sido muy importante como una herramienta que puede usarse para, discúlpeme un momento porque estoy teniendo retorno. Ya, creo que ya. Como una herramienta que viene siendo usada por diferentes movimientos de campesinos y campesinas para demandar sus derechos acá en Colombia. Déjenme, están viendo mi presentación, pero estamos en la última. Ok. Como les decía, esta declaración es un espaldarazo. Si esto se puede traducir, perdónenme los traductores, si no es tan fácil traducirlo, al movimiento campesino colombiano. Pero hay que mencionar que el Estado colombiano fue uno de los países que se abstuvo de votar la declaración de derechos de campesinos y campesinas, lo cual recibió grandes críticas por parte de diferentes sectores de la población en Colombia y también del movimiento campesino. Si bien este documento no es de obligatorio cumplimiento, puede jugar un rol fundamental como herramienta de principios y parámetros de interpretación en todo lo que tiene que ver con las demandas y posibles legislaciones y políticas públicas que se puedan establecer para mejorar la condición de campesinos y campesinas en Colombia. Los alcances de esta declaración son supremamente importantes por su naturaleza. Esta declaración tiene un carácter político y puede tener efectos importantes, como ya les decía, en la interpretación de los derechos fundamentales y la ampliación de los estándares de protección alcanzados hasta el momento por el ordenamiento interno. Y de igual manera puede llegar a precisar esas obligaciones que tienen los estados frente a la población campesina y especialmente en nuestro país. Los derechos reconocidos en la declaración guardan una relación con los reclamos históricos y la lucha del campesinado por su reconocimiento, tanto a nivel internacional como a nivel nacional. Acá en Colombia, en diferentes momentos de nuestra historia, se ha buscado el reconocimiento del campesinado como sujeto de derechos. Y esto es supremamente importante porque, por ejemplo, le daría un papel preponderante frente a las consultas previas que deben realizarse para la implementación de megaproyectos en los territorios que actualmente habitan los campesinos y las campesinas en Colombia. El llamado de la declaración a que se tomen medidas normativas y legislativas para garantizar la efectividad de derechos para esta población va de la mano con las exigencias del campesinado colombiano y con la expedición de políticas públicas y un marco normativo para su protección, protección en toda una amplia gama de derechos que en este momento son altamente vulnerados para nuestra población campesina. La agenda del movimiento campesino se compenetra con lo que ha planteado esta declaración, como por ejemplo la solicitud de implementar los enfoques de género, el enfoque generacional. Actualmente en Colombia hay un despoblamiento de nuestro campo, ya que los jóvenes tienen poco posibilidades de plantear proyectos de vida para su permanencia en estos territorios. Por otro lado, la necesidad de que se creen programas de asistencia técnica para estas poblaciones, que se mejoren las redes y capacidades para acceder a los mercados y generar una economía campesina sostenible y que revierta en la calidad de vida de esta población en Colombia, que sean protegidos y protegidas de todas las formas de violencia. Como tú lo mencionabas, Mike, el campesinado ha sido el gran afectado en el conflicto interno que hemos vivido durante más de 50 años en Colombia. Como ya les decía, también el reconocimiento del campesinado como sujeto de derechos, la superación de la pobreza, el sector rural en Colombia es donde se viven los más altos índices de pobreza y pobreza extrema actualmente. El derecho al medio ambiente, a la soberanía alimentaria, a tener una infraestructura para generar ese desarrollo interno en nuestros sectores rurales. Por otro lado, la salud, la seguridad social y algo muy importante, su derecho a ser defensores de derechos humanos. Como lo decías también, Mike, hay una fuerte criminalización y persecución de la población campesina en Colombia, porque se estigmatizan en medio del conflicto armado interno y se les señala de pertenecer a uno u otro bando. Y esto repercute gravemente en la situación de derechos humanos que actualmente vive el campesinado en Colombia. Una de las razones, de acuerdo a la Cancillería colombiana, para no votar esta declaración es que acá en Colombia existe legislación suficiente para la protección del campesinado, pero esto no es así. El gobierno no ha incluido realmente a esta población en las políticas agrarias que se han dado hasta el momento. Y obviamente esto se ve reflejado en que aún se viven estas precarias condiciones de marginalidad y desigualdad. Esto quedó evidenciado en una audiencia pública que se hizo el año pasado, convocada por la Procuraduría General de la Nación, y donde diferentes sectores campesinos y de movimientos y organizaciones sociales rurales en el país dieron cuenta de esa grave radiografía que muestra esta situación precaria del campesinado en Colombia. En Colombia son más de 11.000 campesinos con los que contamos. 5.000 de ellos son mujeres y más de 1.5 millones son familias campesinas, de acuerdo a nuestro Departamento Administrativo de Estadísticas, el DANE. Y por otro lado, aquí hay un dato bastante interesante: el 32% de los jóvenes en Colombia se identifica como campesinos, pero este 32%, como les decía, son personas que actualmente no tienen oportunidades para su permanencia en el campo. Estas son razones suficientes para centrar acciones en políticas públicas para la ruralidad, y obviamente la declaración es una herramienta que permitirá con la anuencia del Estado poder tener esas políticas públicas consolidadas, porque hasta el momento no las tenemos. El movimiento campesino ha venido luchando por ello, y es así que desde la Red Nacional de Agricultura Familiar, junto con otras organizaciones de campesinos y campesinas, lograron en el año 2017 unos lineamientos de política pública para la agricultura campesina familiar y étnica comunitaria, que es la resolución ministerial 464. Si nosotros hacemos un cruce entre esta resolución y lo que dice la declaración, vamos a encontrar muchísimas coincidencias, y es así que tanto la RENAF como otras organizaciones vienen haciendo presión al gobierno colombiano para implementar estos lineamientos de política pública, también teniendo como base la declaración. Se han trabajado proyectos de ley que desafortunadamente no han pasado en el escenario legislativo, no han sido aprobados para, como ya les decía, que se dé el reconocimiento del campesinado como sujeto de derechos. Por otro lado, Colombia ha habido un gran olvido hacia el campesinado, lo cual se evidencia, como ya les decía, en estos altos índices de pobreza, inequidad, exclusión, estigmatización y violencia histórica. Se trata que el Estado, las demandas que tiene el campesinado en Colombia es que el Estado llegue de manera integral con toda su oferta social, económica, de infraestructura y de justicia. El 86% del campesinado en Colombia se encuentra ubicado dentro de la economía informal, es decir, que no tiene las garantías suficientes para desempeñar esa labor tan importante que es la producción de nuestros alimentos. Cerca del 60% del abastecimiento alimentario en Colombia proviene de la agricultura campesina, familiar y étnica comunitaria. No se demanda la presencia del Estado a través de las Fuerzas Armadas, se demanda una presencia real, estructural, porque creemos que gran parte de la paz en Colombia depende de dar solución a todas estas necesidades que han sido insatisfechas históricamente. Los campesinos y campesinas en Colombia son actores fundamentales para toda la agenda de desarrollo sustentable en el país, y es por esto que seguimos en esta lucha. Muchísimas gracias por su tiempo y por esta invitación.
Thank you, Liliana. And I think we're left in no doubt in the end of your presentation of the relevance of the declaration to a country such as Colombia. I'm sure there are many questions. I will pick out one for you just before we move over to Africa. And I would like to thank Jagat, who actually has answered many of the questions directed to him in the chat. Thank you, Jagat. Please have a look at the chat. There's some great questions and some great answers already. Let me come to a question from Juan. To you, Liliana, on what is the link between UNDROP and the comprehensive rural reform that's part of the peace accords. How do you see UNDROP being a tool to strengthen that aspect of the peace accords in Colombia? And it'd be great if you've got any experiences, examples for you to put them out.
Claro que sí. En Colombia, pues bueno, no sé si todos ustedes lo sepan, pero atravesamos por un proceso de paz que dio como resultado unos acuerdos específicos, y uno de los puntos de este acuerdo tiene que ver con una reforma rural integral. Como les decía hace un momento, gran parte de los problemas estructurales que dieron origen al conflicto en Colombia están asentados en todas esas inequidades, desigualdades históricas que han existido para el sector rural en Colombia. De hecho, el surgimiento de las guerrillas en Colombia ha estado ligado a esas demandas históricas del campesinado, y es así que este primer punto del acuerdo de paz establece todo un marco que permita dar salida a esos conflictos estructurales que hemos venido viviendo. La declaración es una herramienta más que, usada dentro de el cumplimiento de cada uno de esos puntos del punto 1 del acuerdo de paz, permitiría avanzar hacia dar solución a esas demandas estructurales. Por ejemplo, el acceso a la tierra, la formalización de la tierra en Colombia es uno de los puntos que tiene asiento dentro de ese punto 1 del acuerdo final de paz. En Colombia hay un gran porcentaje de inequidad en el acceso a la tierra para campesinos y campesinas, lo cual como ya les decía, es uno de los factores estructurales del conflicto que hemos vivido históricamente. Por otro lado, también el derecho a que los campesinos y campesinas tengan la posibilidad de decidir sobre qué tipo de desarrollo quieren en sus territorios, y esto obviamente reflejado en los programas de desarrollo con enfoque territorial que son los PEDETs y que se promovieron a través del acuerdo de paz, y que también en la declaración se habla de cómo las voces de campesinos y campesinas en términos de participación y construcción de política pública para sus territorios debe ser tenida en cuenta. Por otro lado, también, bueno, estoy dando más de un ejemplo, con este no menciono más, el avanzar hacia mejores estándares en términos de equidad de género, reconocimiento del papel de las mujeres en todos estos procesos organizativos y de lucha histórica, pero también de generar mecanismos que le den a las mujeres campesinas y campesinas esta equidad y mejores condiciones de vida para el desarrollo de sus familias y de sus comunidades. Yo dejaría por ahí, sé que tenemos un corto tiempo y espero haber respondido la pregunta.
Thank you, Liliana. There's a couple more great questions in the chat for you, but I'd ask you, Liliana, just to go to the chat and type your answers. Please do so in Spanish, and we'll do our best to summarize the questions and the answers in English in the chat as well. We're going to move on, and we're going to go to Africa now. So I'm going to invite Emerance from PAFO. PAFO is a very important organization. It's the umbrella federation of the 5 regional farmer federations of Africa. And so we're very, very privileged indeed to have Emerance from PAFO. She's a program manager with the platform to give us a perspective on the relevance of the UN Declaration in protecting the land rights of farmers in Africa. So over to you, please, Emerance, go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the introduction, for giving me this opportunity to present a little bit on the use of the UN Declaration, the right of peasants to protect farmers' land in Africa. Maybe to give you a quick overview on agriculture in Africa. So agriculture is really an important sector in Africa, whereby it is a major contributor to the development of the continent, and it employs on the continent. So also Africa is the second world's largest continent. And the good thing of it, we have a bigger part of land which is really productive. So I will try to go quickly, if you allow me, of course, on challenges we are having now in Africa. I think if I go through that, it will help us to understand the relevance of this declaration to Africa and the best way for us to use it. So most of challenges in Africa about land rights, it is on policies whereby we have limited access to information on existing policies and implementation processes. This is mostly for smallholder farmers who are located in rural areas. So we also have not enough consultation with smallholder farmers when it comes to land policy processes. We also see difficulties to access land-related services to smallholder farmers, mostly those who are located in rural areas. So we also have not enough transparency when it comes to land policies execution and appropriation. So, but this vary depending on countries. So it is not for all countries, but I have tried to take some major challenges. So we also still see some cases of conflict between farmers and breeders. This is also the most challenging thing. Also, we do have other challenges depending on this globalization we are entering in, whereby we have seen some multinational corporations that are coming in Africa and that are occupying a larger scale of productive land. So we also see increase in urbanization, mostly for those cities, they don't have sustainable planning for urban mapping, and this sometimes it is causing for productive lands to be used for residential. So also other challenges we are seeing, mostly there is land degradation, whereby we are facing a problem of environmental stress. I think this is not only to Africa. We also have an issue of absence of a sustainable land management plan. Here, mostly it is by government. We also see other challenge of war and conflict in some parts of Africa. So on top of those few challenges I have mentioned, we have one specific vulnerable group, mostly women. We also have other group that are vulnerable, but today I would like to focus more on women because they are facing all challenges I have mentioned above. But on top of that, there is also other challenges that are particular to them, whereby in some countries we don't see gender sensitive policies to protect the rights of women. Also, in some parts of Africa, women don't have enough capacity to defend their rights. So I would like to go quickly on what we are doing right now as civil society organizations, farmers organizations like PAFO, to try to address those challenges by referring to the Declaration of Rights of Peasants. So we are mostly focusing on a drive policy to ensure that the land remains, of course, a priority in the policy agenda. We are also trying to work on increasing the capacity of mostly smallholder farmers by providing them with training and other capacity building mechanism to help them be able to claim or defend their rights. We are also focusing on participating in negotiation processes, either at national, at continental, or international level. So we are also focusing on inclusion of gender sensitive policies in the land governance. So on top of what we are doing right now as civil organizations, we would like to propose some recommendations, of course, to other stakeholders that are involved in land issues to the government. The recommendation we can give is to ensure equitable land distribution and land access, also to secure land tenure and land rights. Also, for government to set mechanisms to fairly solve land conflict, as you have seen in challenges. Also, to establish responsive land use planning, or also to improve land policy, dissemination. Because, as I have said in the challenges, some smallholders doesn't have access to this information. So also other stakeholder we find interesting in this process, it is a research institution whereby we propose for research institution to work on teaching farmers. Of course, they will be working with civil society organizations like PAFO and other to teach more smallholder farmers, mostly on management of land. Also, we propose to work with them in terms of ensuring, the conservation of land fertility. So I have tried to summarize to be able to be on time. So this is very summarized my presentation. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Emerald. Thank you so much. I think it's none of us are left with any doubt of the relevance of what is contained in the declaration to the continent of Africa. So thank you for laying out those important points. And I think we'll come back to. I'll invite from the floor as well, particularly if there are African organizations that have been using UNDROP in their work to comment, to put in the chat, or later on when we open the floor to bring their experience to complement what we've heard from Pafo as well. Again, many excellent questions in the chat, and thank you so much to the speakers that are also quite active in the chat in answering those. I don't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation, so I'm going to go straight to our next speaker, who again we're very, very privileged to have with us. This is Michael Winfor. Those of us who were involved in the negotiations for the voluntary guidelines on good governance of 10-year fisheries and forests 7 or 8 years ago will know he's a very familiar face, but his history goes back much earlier than that. Apart from helping to set up, being one of the founders of FIAN, which is one of the most active organizations globally in this space. Michael was part of the very first general comment on the right to food, which led to the voluntary guidelines on the right to food, which led to the voluntary guidelines on the right to land, and are now leading to possibly a general comment on the right to land. So I can't think of anyone better than him to describe this process of the gradual normalization or the gradual acceptance of human rights in areas that are incredibly important to the membership of ILC and to many of the organizations, I would say all of the organizations that are on this call. So Michael, as a member of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and as somebody who's been very, very involved in this process from its roots, and looking ahead to where you hope to be taking it over the coming months, we'd love to hear from you your comments on not just UNDROP itself, but where you see it going, where you hope it will go, and the roles that the kind of organizations that are participating in this webinar can play to help push it in the direction they would like to see it. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mike, with the same name. And welcome to all of you, and thanks for inviting me to be with you and give an overview of what the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights is doing. Maybe I start by saying UNDROP already is a document which can be used by farmers' organizations, by rural organizations to demand their rights, because it's a soft law instrument. And in international law, sometimes you think soft law is the weaker one and hard law is the better one. It is not always like this. The nature of legal instruments is very different in international law, and some soft law instruments are extremely influential. Think of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, yeah, and think of other declarations which are there on human rights defenders and others, which are extremely valuable instruments, and also the voluntary guidelines on responsible governance for tenure of land, forest, and fisheries is an extremely good text. Yeah? It's 54 pages describing what states should do when registering, when administrating land, and take it and use it. Yeah, so I think I would to encourage all of us to use these instruments because they are already valuable. Yeah, so Our committee is now monitoring one of the binding treaties, one of the two essential treaties which has been developed to implement the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And the committee has always been focusing on land as an important issue. If you look back into the committee's history, you find already from 97 a General Comment number 7 on forced evictions, which was dealing with the problem of people being forcibly evicted or pushed away, particularly also in urban areas, so on the right to housing. So the committee has also developed in 99 the voluntary guidelines, the General Comment on the right to land, on the right to food, sorry, which was already talking extremely importantly on access to productive resources as one of the components to implement the right to food. It was understood as nothing, not as a right to be fed, as a right to produce your own food, to feed yourself. Yeah, in that sense, it was talking about the importance of access to productive resources. All this has been then also transferred maybe to all the other soft law instruments developed later, the voluntary guidelines on the right to food, but also the voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure of land. So I think these access to productive resources is a core element of the right to, of everything around land, you can say. Yeah? The pressure on land has not been reduced since then. We have rapid urbanization, and I think Eminence was talking about all this gentrification, financialization of housing markets. We have land grabbing, land large-scale development projects. We have speculation over land. We have, let's say, environmental challenges like biodiversity or climate change, and we have extremely weak governance in terms of land. Yeah, and you see this if you go to governance issues to the all three speakers who have talked before. They were reporting about how weak is governance in many countries, and this is one of the core at this. So based on this, we came to the idea that it would be good to develop a general comment which talks about land and the relationship to economic, social, and cultural rights. And the relationship of land is to several of these rights. It's to the right to food, it's to the right to water, it's to the right to housing, even to health, and many other, yeah, all these livelihood rights, to the right to work. So all this is related to this. And in that sense, we try to bring this up, and we have already inhaled or read carefully UNDROP, yeah, as a maybe a motivating tool, or also an interesting tool which we can build on when we work on these areas. We are already using UNDROP also in our state monitoring processes, which we do on a regular basis. Now we have developed this general comment, and I say developed because we are going to publish our first draft in the week to come. It will be published on the website of the committee, and it's open for all comments from all of you, from all stakeholders, states, NGOs, civil society organizations. And so please send us your comments. It will be first published in English, a month later in French and Spanish. And we have a 3 months period for public consultation. We will then review it, and we will adopt it in autumn. So the document will be then formally published, let's say, at the end of this year. What we have done is we focused the whole text on legitimate land users, and not only on tenure. There are so many forms of people who use land collectively, as indigenous communities, as peasants communities, as maybe also breeders, as Eminence was already saying. So we have a variety of, let's say, land user structures and legitimate land user rights. That is what we should talk about, and not only on ownership. Yeah, and one of the recent studies I've seen that in Africa, 90% has not been legally recognized as land. So you can see how many still things are to do when you talk about, let's say, registering or land registry. So that is important to see. We started by saying we define what are state obligations related to land, and we talk first about non-discrimination, which is parallel to the UNDROP text article 17.2, as Christopher was already mentioning. And we particularly talk about the situation of women, and we particularly talk about the situation of all those who use common land or communal lands, because this is a large group which is often overseen, and in all types of land registry very often overseen. We then have a section, larger section, which talks about the state obligations concerning at the national level and also internationally concerning land. And we follow the structure the committee is always using, talking about obligations to respect, protect, and fulfill. Respect means the state should not, through own policies, maybe endanger the access to productive resources people might have by pushing them away or not guaranteeing access to registers or whatever. Protection means the state has to make sure that not third parties like big landowners, international companies are forcibly evicting people or destroying existing access to. And the obligation fulfill means the state has an obligation to also think about what is with all those people who currently have no secure access to, let's say, productive resources. And this needs to be guaranteed through progressive either registration or recognition of, let's say, user rights, but also maybe thinking about forms of agrarian reform where people might get access who have never had access before. These are the large chapter on state obligations, and it particularly goes also so far to talk about agrarian reform, which is important in many countries who have a colonial legacy, or maybe where history or the access is historically not foreseen for certain groups or larger groups even of the society. We then have a section talking about specific topics of implementation. And there we talk about armed conflicts, the problem of corruption. We then have an extra chapter on peasants' rights, where we particularly make a reference to UNDROP and also to the Article 17. And while we have no consensus in the committee to talk in that sense as UNDROP is doing about the right to land, we say that for certain groups like peasants, the issue of access to productive resources is functionally equivalent to a right to land. That is what we use at the moment in the text. You might look at the text which we have drafted and give us comments, but that's what we have said. So we went very far by saying this is really for this group of smallholder peasants, for example, it is functionally equivalent to a right to land. That's what we say. We talk about human rights defenders because many people involved in land struggles are often at risk also to be prosecuted. And we talk about climate change related displacements, environmental threats. These are the specific topics. And then we close with a chapter on remedies, which is also part of UNDROP Article 17.5 in that sense. So let me summarize. We talk basically about legitimate land users, the need that they're treated fairly when land is registered, administrated, and transferred. It must, we also have a large chapter on indigenous lands, but it's also many other groups who have collective or customary land relationships. They all needs to be recognized. And even if there were people only using maybe parts of forest on a regular scale, these are legitimate land users, and states should really make sure that they don't oversee people, because that is at the core of most of the access problems, that people are not recognized in the way, in their relationship they had historically to this. And if then there is land use change, and particularly rapid land use change, be it through urbanization or large-scale investments or through climate change, these people will always be overseen. Any solution will be looked without taking care of them. Yeah, and this is why we can have a lot of investments in land happening, and this might even increase poverty or the situation, the difficult situation of many people, because their historical access to land has been overseen. Maybe this has been said. And one last word, Mike, is on, we have a strong section also on evictions. Yeah, so forced evictions, and that this should be only done any type of taking land away on for public purposes and very defined standards. So I have described only 7 minutes for a rich text. Please give us your comments, and you are cordially invited to read the text carefully and give us hints when you think something is missing, overseen, or we should give it a different note. Yeah, so that's what I can say today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Michael. You've described a lot of elaboration in a short while. I will lean on you just to take another 30 seconds, if you may, just to explain what is the importance of a general comment on land in this case? How does it build and carry forward from what's already been achieved with the voluntary guidelines on good governance of tenure fisheries and forest, and now on UNDROP? Why is it important? And secondly, you mentioned that it will be put out for consultation next week and possibly considered in September. So what is the importance of the process, the consultation process, and what are you expecting out of the consultation process, and how can organizations engage in the consultation? If you could cover that in less than a minute, that would be fantastic.
The importance of general comments is that they describe how the committee perceives what states are obliged to do. So it refers to existing rights, like the right to food, the right to water, the right to housing, and makes an explanation how this should be seen and interpreted. This is helpful, particularly for court cases, because it can be referred to by government officials who want to implement this guideline, the covenant. It can be referred to by judges, by lawyers advocating for cases. And this has been used in many instances for the right to water or other economic, social, cultural rights, but it's also done by other committees on children's rights, women's rights. So these general comments have a certain legal worth, yeah, because it's an interpretation of a binding notion. Yeah? So that can be very helpful for national processes of implementation and also legal application. And therefore, if we make a reference to UNDROP, it's also, let's say, supporting the further application of a declaration like UNDROP declaration. And when we make a public consultation, it's also to give weight to our general comment. We don't want to make it in isolation. We want to make it public. We want to get comments from states, from government officials, but also from civil society, because it gives also weight to the document. It makes the document known, and it makes also it much easier to be used later. Yeah. So then we get the comments, and we will try what is reasonable for us. We can further develop it, like Sandy was already saying in the chat, explain a bit more what is legitimate, really. Things of that we can take up, make the text clearer, and then adopt it maybe in the best way we can do. Yeah, and I think we can always get a lot of insights from people struggling on land issues to learn more about this. Yeah? Even if we have tried to do as much of outreach while we were drafting this, had several consultations, we still can always learn to this. Yeah, so that is where we are, and we hope to have it adopted in October, and that it becomes a guiding document for states, for judges, for civil society, monitoring states' performance, and yeah, that can be a helpful document.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. That's really fantastic. Congratulations to you and to the other members of the committee, and I hope that we can put into the chat the website address where the consultation will take place. And I would encourage very much participants to take part in that. We're going to move to our final speaker now, and very much along the same lines of the putting soft law into practice, and therefore making it stronger, making it used, making it referenced in national law and domesticated. We're going to go to another member of the Human Rights Committee, and we're very privileged to have Hélène Tigruja, and she's going to talk to us about how UNDROP has been used in cases of how UNDROP has been used in adjudication and in the application of the declaration. So over to our last speaker, Hélène. We're very happy to hear what you have to say, and we look forward to it. Thank you. You're welcome.
Merci beaucoup, Mike, et merci beaucoup pour l'invitation à parler. Alors, moi, je vais effectivement parler en lien avec ce qui vient d'être dit par Michael. Je vais parler de la manière dont la déclaration, même si ça n'est pas un traité international qui lie directement les États, comment est-ce qu'elle peut être utilisée devant les organes internationaux de protection des droits de l'homme. Donc, s'il y a parmi les participants des avocats, des membres d'organisations non gouvernementales qui travaillent sur la stratégie contentieuse, Je vais essayer de montrer, en évoquant deux affaires, comment la déclaration peut être utilisée comme source d'interprétation en réalité de traités internationaux. Et ce qu'il faut relever d'emblée en introduction, c'est que même si les questions dont on parle depuis tout à l'heure sont des questions qui ont essentiellement une dimension économique, sociale, culturelle, c'est aussi, la déclaration soulève aussi des questions qui ont rapport avec les droits civils et politiques. Donc, c'est une question qui finalement est très globale et peut être soulevée devant différents organes de protection des droits de l'homme et pas simplement les organes qui travaillent sur les questions économiques, sociales et culturelles. Donc, je vais donner deux exemples de jurisprudence très récentes dans lesquelles la déclaration directement a été utilisée, encore une fois, comme source d'interprétation et pas directement, puisque ça n'est pas un traité. Alors, un premier exemple auquel je tiens beaucoup, c'est une décision qui a été adoptée par le Comité des droits de l'homme donc en 2019, une décision Cáceres contre Paraguay. Et c'est une décision qui est intéressante parce que le Comité des droits de l'homme est un organe chargé d'appliquer le pacte international relatif aux droits civils et politiques, donc l'autre pacte de 1966. Et dans le pacte sur les droits civils et politiques, on ne parle pas du tout de droit à la terre. On ne parle même pas de droit de propriété. Donc, il n'y a aucune disposition a priori qui concerne la question dont on est en train de parler. Mais comment est-ce que le Comité des droits de l'homme a intégré la déclaration de 2018 dans cette décision? Eh bien, la décision portait sur la pollution dont ont souffert les auteurs qui ont saisi le Comité des droits de l'homme et qui étaient des paysans. Et cette pollution a à la fois affecté leur santé, donc le Comité des droits de l'homme s'est prononcé sur le droit à la vie, mais la pollution a aussi affecté leur terre, toute leur culture, tout a été pollué, donc ils ne pouvaient plus du tout cultiver les terres, l'eau, qui était l'eau du puits utilisée par la communauté paysanne, etc., etc. Et donc, ce qu'a fait le Comité des droits de l'homme, c'est qu'il a interprété le droit au domicile. Donc, c'est très particulier, mais le droit au domicile qui est protégé par l'article 17 du Pacte international relatif aux droits civils et politiques, à la lumière de la déclaration de 2018, en disant mais finalement, le domicile ici de cette communauté paysanne, c'est quoi? C'est sa terre. Et sa terre c'est la terre sur laquelle la communauté vit, la communauté travaille, c'est la source de revenus. Et finalement, le droit à l'environnement de cette communauté a été atteint, et donc le domicile lu à la lumière de la déclaration de 2018 lui-même a été atteint. Donc, ce qui est très intéressant avec cette décision Cáceres contre Paraguay, c'est de montrer que, comme le disait Michael auparavant, même si la déclaration de 2018 est de la soft law, et même si le pacte international relatif aux droits civils et politiques ne parle pas de droits économiques, sociaux et culturels et ne parle pas de droit à la terre, on peut créer des liens et on peut adopter, je dirais, une approche innovante ou une approche nouvelle du pacte qui, lui, a été adopté en 1966. Donc ça, je trouve que s'il y a des avocats ou des personnes spécialisées dans le contentieux stratégique qui nous écoutent, je trouve que c'est très important et c'est très intéressant d'essayer de porter la déclaration peut-être au-delà des frontières qui sont celles de la déclaration, et d'essayer de faire bouger les lignes et de faire bouger les concepts. La deuxième affaire, très rapidement, que j'évoquerai, est une affaire cette fois-ci qui a été portée et qui a été tranchée par la Cour interaméricaine des droits de l'homme, donc en 2020, dans un arrêt contre l'Argentine. Je mettrai dans la boîte de dialogue les références plus précises. Et là, c'est un arrêt qui soulève une question, et c'est peut-être d'ailleurs une question que je lancerai à la fois à Michael pour l'observation générale qui est en train d'être discutée, et puis tous les autres intervenants. L'arrêt de la Cour interaméricaine met en parallèle le droit à la terre des communautés autochtones et le droit à la terre des paysans. Et donc, la Cour interaméricaine renvoie à la déclaration de 2018 pour dire qu'effectivement, les paysans ont droit à la terre. Mais la difficulté dans l'arrêt contre l'Argentine, c'est que la communauté paysanne vivait sur des terres qui appartenaient à une communauté autochtone. Et donc là, la Cour devait trancher la question de la conciliation. Comment est-ce que l'on fait pour concilier le droit à la terre des communautés autochtones et le droit à la terre des communautés paysannes? Dans cet arrêt-là, la Cour interaméricaine a donné la priorité au droit à la terre de la communauté autochtone en disant à l'État, parmi les mesures de réparation, qu'il avait 5 ans pour assurer, pour garantir le droit à la terre de la communauté paysanne. Mais je trouve que ça pose la question, peut-être d'ailleurs qui n'est pas tout à fait tranchée dans la déclaration de 2018, et si j'ai bien lu le projet d'observation générale, qui n'est pas non plus tout à fait tranché dans le projet d'observation générale du Comité sur les droits économiques, sociaux et culturels, ça pose le problème de la conciliation. Et comment est-ce qu'un État peut concilier ou doit concilier finalement ces deux impératifs concurrents, droit à la terre des autochtones et droit à la terre des paysans. Voilà, donc je termine là, j'en dis pas plus et j'ai respecté, je pense, le temps, mais simplement je voulais insister sur le fait que l'on peut aussi avoir une stratégie contentieuse vis-à-vis de cette déclaration de 2018 parce qu'elle est extrêmement intéressante et extrêmement importante. Je vais mettre dans la boîte de dialogue les références jurisprudentielles. Merci beaucoup.
Helen, thank you for an excellent overview of the application, the challenges and the opportunities in the application of UNDROP. We're getting very close to the end, and as I said at the beginning, we're going to do another poll with you. I've been following also in the chat the answers that have been given to many of the questions, and thank you so much for everybody who's been asking and answering in the chat, and it's very interesting indeed. Is my sound not very good? Can you hear me? Just wave if you can hear me. Okay, good. There's one question that wasn't answered that I think is a particularly important one, and that's on youth. What is the relevance, or what is the particular mention of UNDROP on youth, considering the fact, as fortunately many organizations that work on land and work in support of peasant farmers are now taking much more notice of how we support the farmers of tomorrow to be the farmers of tomorrow. Would any of the speakers like to just make a quick comment on the relevance to youth, explicit or implicit, of UNDROP? Christoph, please.
Yes, just to say that there is a reference to youth in the Article 17 on the right to land and the agrarian reform, need for agrarian reform, and the fact that there should be priority for landless and youth. And I don't know how it is in other continents, but in Europe we have a big discussion on that, and lots of youth movement, peasant youth movement are pushing to get land, because it's in many countries it's difficult to be a new peasant, and you inherit the land from your family, and it's difficult to buy new land. So that's, at least that's the case in Switzerland and many other European countries. So that's the very explicit references in this Article 17. And as I responded in the chat, there was also the fight against the worst form of child labor, which happens almost in the majority in agriculture.
Mike?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, in the case of Nepal, there was no specific declaration, UN declaration on the peasants. So it is a very relevant for our cases, especially for the smallholder peasants and landless peasants and the indigenous communities as well, because it was not linked with the human rights issue, since there was no declaration, especially on the specific on the peasants. So this is really helpful for us for the rights on the smallholder, including peasants' rights, for the comprehensive land and agrarian rights of the peasants. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagat. There's so many things that we could discuss, but I'm going to bring us to our final poll. Before we leave, we would like to look ahead, and we would like to ask you. I'm going to launch it now. From what you've heard, considering what you've learned, how do you think that you may use UNDROP in your work? So do you think it will be part of your toolbox in fighting forced evictions and displacements? Do you think it'll be in raising awareness about the right to land and UNDROP, for fighting for agrarian reform, your efforts for the recognition of peasants as rights holders, or by sending information or communication to UN treaty bodies, including UNDROP? So please go ahead and answer. You can answer in English or in French or in Spanish. They will be combined for the same questions. I can see we've got 7 so far of 92, so many of you still to vote. Please go ahead. So far, awareness raising is the highest, followed by fighting for the recognition of peasants as right holders. Please carry on. Okay, I'm going to close it in a couple of seconds. So if you haven't voted yet, please go ahead now. Right, and I'll share the results with you. And the biggest one, all of them are seen as important, but really awareness raising. And I think the value of awareness raising is in using it as a tool, as a global tool in national and in local contexts. I'm really sorry we're not going to have time to open the conversation. We've had a good discussion in the chat, even if on the floor there wasn't so much time for back and forth. And I must say, as we finish this, I feel like we've been part in this hour and a half of quite a historic process, because we've had a view back over the development of soft international human rights law that is linked to land, that started off not being about land, that started off being about food, that grew into land, that went on to the rights of peasants, and we also heard about the rights of indigenous people, UNDROP, and how these reinforce and converge each other, and a cross-cutting interest across all of these, which is land issues, how it has become, and it is becoming, more and more accepted as a human right, and how that process is continuing, and how we can be part of that process. So I do want to recall the invitation from the committee, from Michael on behalf of the committee, to comment on the draft general comment as they put it out for consultation over the next week, and we hope adopt it in September. So I would really like to congratulate the specialists among us on UNDROP, Christopher and Michael and Ellen, for the work that you've been doing, that we recognize has gone back a long time and has involved many organizations. On behalf of ILC, we would like to particularly congratulate La Via Campesina and FIAN as the organizations that have really championed and led and pushed this work. I attended one of the sessions, and I could see the mountain that had to be climbed to get the declaration adopted. has been done. And as you saw in the chat, there was opposition to UNDROP when more than 10 years ago it was adopted. But now every country has accepted it. And we, as Chris said in the chat, we hope the same. Those countries which abstained become champions as well. And so as we look forward to the general comments coming out, we look forward to one more step in the normalization of a right to land. I would also like to end by thanking as well Emerance and Jagat and Liliana, and congratulate you for the work in your countries and in your continents. We're with you. This is a work that you do on the ground that we know is not easy. You face challenges and you face dangers, but you have the rest of us at your shoulders. So thank you for the work that you do. Thank you everybody for coming to participate. Thank you to the translators. There will be in the link, in the chat, a link to an evaluation that we would ask you please just to fill out. It's very quick. It's just for us to learn from what you liked and what you thought could be improved as we do the next one, because these webinars are a series. And before we end, I will have one final request, and that is please to put on your cameras and just wave or give us the thumbs up so we can take a nice screenshot of everybody. Thank you so much, and thank you to the translators for your excellent work.